looks like maybe some are still reading. Yeah, it looks Tanya's still reading.
So I just got my audio end at the end of what you're saying. Are you saying we don't have a quorum to approve the minutes? Is that?
No. I'm sorry. What I was saying was that at the last meeting, it was kind of a little bit crazy in that regard to the quorum and stuff. And Julia just wanted to make sure that she got all of that in the minutes correctly.
Okay.
And by that, you're just saying that because the meeting began at 12:06. Where are you saying? What am I reading too fast? What are you saying, Julia?
It's more so just documenting. So I just kept with the order of the agenda, even though we went out of order with the agenda. So I don't know if there's a way that we need to capture that, or if it's sufficient just by saying, we did introductions and presentations from at 11 or whatever, and then we didn't start the official meeting until we had a quorum at 12:06 or whatever the time was. I can't remember.
I think it's fine because it's saying that the actual meeting call to order was at 12:06 and we had the quorum. I mean, that would be my position, but I'm not the attorney in the room.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of who I was deferring to too.
Well, then if we don't have any other suggestions or changes, we'll approve them as submitted. Okay. All right, then on to the chairman's report. We did not get the financial information in enough time for this meeting, so that will be included for our June meeting. So at the last meeting we had, the site visit report was a part of the agenda for last time. Just kind of wanting to point out again, if anyone had any comments or questions or concerns about the site visit, we can add it to next month's agenda to discuss it. Just kind of maybe if you want to shoot Julia an email if there's anything specific related to that you would like to talk about. And then, Julia, are we doing an email vote on? We already did on the family. So the results of the family court guides, that will be included in our June agenda, to the added expense to print those family court guides. And then the only other thing on the chairman's report is there is another wake up call event tonight at East Aurora High School. We talked about this before as to whether we were going to have our name associated with it, since they were only opening it to their community. They have 55 people registered. I am going to go to make the introduction, so we will have a presence there tonight. And that is all of the chairman's report. Any questions on that? Okay. So we can move on to old business and updates on priorities. The first is the youth and parents. Julia is continuing to work with the partners who have involvement with youth and parents to determine what a collaborative effort might look like. Two things that Julia has kind of put together are ideas for the board to consider, is whether we want to consider bringing data to the established parent and youth groups to get their reactions or ideas. And the second is requesting a presentation from youth and our parents relating to cultural humility or what they think stakeholders should be aware of when working with those who are justice system involved. So just some ideas for us to talk about if we want to expand that role with our youth and parent involvement. Any questions or comments on that? What do we think about potentially providing data to the youth and parent groups? No specific. Okay, so we can keep this on for further discussion, let you all think about it a little bit more. Maybe we can readdress it in June. The second part of this is we talked about this before, is Julia and I met with the students from IMSA and in relation to their group that they have there on racial justice. It's their Student Coalition for Racial Justice, and they do a podcast. And they were looking for people to speak on the podcast. Just so what we are looking for is, I put out before if anyone was interested in talking, but what our thoughts on are having representatives from the board potentially being a part of that podcast. If anybody has any feedback on that, concerns or questions related to that.
I just want to apologize. Julia brought this to me. I keep forgetting to talk to Lisa and or get approval to be able to speak, just only because once it's podcast is out in the ether and I can't speak like on behalf of court services, you know what I mean? So I just keep forgetting. The to-do list is kind of crazy right now. So I don't know if maybe someone that doesn't have to go through that would want to volunteer.
Just a reminder too, that is what they're looking for are people who are involved in the system who can talk about the factors that contribute to juveniles becoming involved in the criminal justice system. So if anyone is open to doing it, if you want to reach out to Julia, we are still trying to work on trying to support them and hopefully help to give them people that they can interview and make a part of their podcast.
Rochelle?
Yes.
It sounds like a wonderful thing. Are they looking for persons of color to participate in this? Because our council board does not have a ton of diversity.
So when Julia and I met with them, that did not come up at all. That I remember. Julia can weigh in if I'm forgetting something. I think they are more just interested in factors in general that lead to people becoming a part of the criminal justice system.
And I can send out, they gave me examples of their podcast. It seems like they've done one and with a couple of legislators, and then they did another one that's sort of, I don't know, it's almost like a role play. It kind of seems like it's really short. It's probably like 5 to 7 minutes. The first one's a little bit longer, and they asked them similar questions. So I think I had kind of thrown out to a few people who have been involved in the conversation up until this point that maybe, based on reviewing the podcast, that we might have different ideas about what we want to present, so that it's not duplicative of what's already being said. Because they have asked those questions, like what contributes to juvenile justice system involvement, and it's the things that we always talk about, right? Like unmet needs, mental health, so on and so forth. And so rather than repeating that over and over, maybe there's something that we can offer that takes it a step further.
I'm interested, and I would like to hear more information. Like you said, Julia, date, time, what specific topic they want to talk about. So I'm open to that. To me, I don't think it's really any different than, I know it's recorded, it's a podcast, but we met with them, you know what I mean? It's the same group that we met with before, and I thought we had a good discussion. But again, where, is this something you have to, is this like a Zoom podcast, or how that all works? But I guess more information, I think would be helpful.
And
You didn't get the blue shirt memo. The guys.
It's Navy.
Oh my goodness.
Navy.
Oh, it is
Yeah.
blue. Who I'm thinking of, and private attorneys don't have to answer to anybody to get onto a podcast, but do you all remember Greg Walker? He worked in juvenile court for a while, and he loves doing that kind of stuff. I could maybe talk to him, and maybe he and I could sit down with him and do a episode or whatever.
That's a good idea. And I just wanted to point out, Eric, these are not the same kids that we met with. These kids are from Illinois Math and Science Academy. It's still a good group, but I just wanted to let you know that it's not the same ones that we had discussions
Okay,
with.
understood. Thank you.
Yeah. And just also to your point, we did not discuss with them yet dates, times, anything like that. We just kind of wanted to float out whether we would have people that would be interested and could then discuss the logistics with them.
I think another good question to ask is, their semester, I'm thinking, is probably coming to the close. I would think that their school year should be ending probably within the next couple of weeks. Is that something they're looking to do before the end of this school semester, or is it something that we can be prepared for the fall? Just because, I mean, unfortunately, we've kind of lagged so long that may change who's available and all of that as well.
I don't know, and Julia, we didn't discuss, I don't know if they're continuing to do it over the summer. That's certainly something we can look into. But yeah, it may be something for the fall for our participation.
Yeah, we can ask them. They've been really good about kind of keeping track and checking in. And so I've gotten some emails since and just kind of said we're continuing to discuss it. But yeah, I don't know that we know what it looks like for them in the summertime. But my understanding from what they said is that they do have to be a part of some sort of committee. So I would envision this committee continuing into the fall, at least, if nothing else.
All right, so we will get some more information. And Julia, you know what, when you sent out the sample of their podcast, I think that you just sent that to me and LaTanya. Could we maybe send it out to everyone?
And
Yeah,
I wasn't
absolutely.
able to listen to the podcast. Like, I followed the link, but I was never able to get to the podcast to hear the recording.
Maybe I sent you the wrong link. So if I did, I apologize. I had to ask. There's one that sends you to this website where you can't listen to it, and then there's one that sends you where it does let you end up listening to it. So I might have sent you the wrong one. So I'll make sure I get the correct one out to the board,
Okay.
and then we can weigh in from there.
All right, so then moving on to law enforcement training, our juvenile justice Jeopardy game, the additional licenses that we got for that. So Kristen sent out an email to JOA, and we have one person that responded and had interest that was from East Dundee. So Julia is reaching out to follow up with him and to get that set up. The question for all of us is if there's anyone else that we can designate for these licenses. Julia had a couple of thoughts. Aurora does peer jury. I don't know if there's anyone there that we could potentially have some interest. SROs, just trying to think of some other ideas that we can offer that to different people.
So we have peer jury next Tuesday. I can ask the couple detectives who run it with me if they would be interested. And I can shoot them an email actually and just see what they say. I believe they were on the original one, but I can just email them separately and ask them.
That sounds good. Anybody else have other ideas of people we could send out to? Okay, so we'll keep working on that, Julia. Maybe we'll get somebody from peer jury. All right, and then restorative practices. Julia, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so if the board remembers, we had a request from West Aurora to do a condensed one-day training that actually took place last Friday. And so we actually had to make a slight adjustment in that. And thanks to Lark, we were able to still offer them an alternative that I hope it sounds like was well received. But there was a family emergency with one of the other trainers for restorative practices. And so we just made that adjustment, but they are still looking to do a restorative practices training in the fall. It was with their alternative school, so it was kind of an interesting opportunity because their kids are on computers all day. And so thinking about how you implement restorative practices within that sort of setting was part of that discussion. And then we have another 2-day training that's coming up in June that we're in the planning stages with. I've reached out to all of the trainers in the county that I'm aware of or connected with. And we've had one person say that she's available. A few of the others have responded, but they don't have availability for the week that we're looking at. And so we're working to solidify a second trainer. There might be one within district that's available for that 2-day training, so that then West Aurora is planning to do their own training of trainers after that 2-day training as well. But I wanted to put out to the board, because we've checked in with the trainers that signed that memorandum of understanding last year as part of going through their training of trainers. And I've reached out to that network a couple of times some people have been more responsive than others, and I understand that this school year has been there. It's a lot of school people, and so I understand, you know, the nature of what the school year was. But I just wanted to check in with the board to see, now that we're kind of coming to the end of our fiscal year, we had set out that we wanted those individuals to do at least one training in the community. And I think kind of it was just the tone that we wanted to, you know, be able to continue to collaborate with them beyond the training of trainers. So if there's any reactions, recommendations, concerns that the board has, or if we feel like those agreements are being upheld based upon, you know, the reports that you're receiving.
So I think, I think the bottom line is, you know, if we're not getting good responses from everyone, do we as a board want to take any action to try to get those people to follow through on the MOU that they signed to be able to get that training? So and in essence, you know, we paid for them to have training with the understanding that they would go out into community and offer this training to others. So the question is, as a board, do we want to do anything to make sure that they are fulfilling their obligation?
I guess the question becomes, what is it that we could do? And then what are we saying? What's the level that we're saying that they're not upholding their side of the agreement? It's one thing to not be responsive, to not be able to give, you know, let me know when you're available. When we're trying to set up the trainings, that's one thing. It's something else that maybe they just don't have the availability for when we're trying to set up the trainings. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then even what is the recourse? Let's say we just have somebody that just flat out took the training and is not being responsive. What can we do? I guess is my question.
Well, that was my question too. You know, our ability to do anything, but I you know, on the flip of that is the fact that we paid for them to do the training. They should at least be responsive, I feel like, to Julia.
How many participants are we talking about that are non-responsive?
It's only a select few.
Like 3, 4?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I could get more concrete information if we needed to know that, but I can just tell based on the responses that I'm not getting them from everybody.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe this, sorry, Julia, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to clarify. I'm not necessarily thinking like that we need to do anything that's like anything's a consequence, but like punishment wise or like reprimanding them, but more so like concerted efforts to reach out, to check in, to see what's going on, to remind, like a reminder that, hey, you signed this agreement. Like I haven't been that overt and direct with them about it. I've just continued to keep it open-ended, like reaching out, hey, is anybody, you know, so at what point does it become like, hey, we want to remind you that you signed this MOU, this agreement, and we're not seeing that this is happening. Can you share a little bit more? Is this happening? You know, whatever the wording is, but that's sort of where my mind was at.
I mean, Julia, would it be helpful if like at a separate time, like you and I meet and kind of share who those people are? And, you know, I try and keep a good tabs on the schools. I'd probably have a good idea if they've had a more difficult year than others. So at least, you know, if they're having a difficult school year and let's say it's a social worker with a caseload of, you know, 60 students, you know, okay, that's understandable. You know, you're barely making it through the day. You know, if you want to do that, I'm completely fine with doing that.
Okay. I think that sounds like a reasonable next step, at least.
Any other questions or comments on that? Okay, and then Julia is going to talk about RED.
Yep, so our RED team meets next on June 10th in the afternoon. So we have plans as set from our last RED meeting that we're going to focus on factors that contribute to decisions at the arrest level and factors that contribute to decisions at the diversion level, kind of looking for any alignment in factors. What are we, you know, considering the same factors? Are there factors that we're considering that might be beyond the control of the individual and how that might contribute to who then becomes involved in the system? And then also we have an article that came about that is talking about the ordinance violations used for truancy and how that's kind of being represented among the disparities as well. And so we're going to bring that to the RED team to take a look at and discuss a little bit further. And then as part of the new grant, I updated the RED plan, and we also have access now to the data brief that was sent to us from the Juvenile Justice Commission. And so I updated the RED plan based on new data. I kept some of the old stuff just because the updated data isn't as specific per se. So I'd like to have that conversation with the RED team to see what it is that we want to continue to pursue, continue to look at, continue to keep on our plan, what we're going to then let go of as well. For the Illinois Racial Justice and Equity Committee, which is the statewide committee, just our 2 work groups met jointly this month just to take an in-depth look at data across the jurisdictions. And then because those data briefs were sent out to, it's over 60 counties in Illinois, which are the over 60 counties that submitted data, they're all getting their data back now. And so now the committee is talking about what resources are available on the committee that can be offered as technical assistance. The other thing that happened within the IRJEC, the statewide committee, and also on our coordinator call recently was discussions about an REIA. There's so many acronyms and I cannot say them. But that REIA stands for Racial Equity Impact Assessment. And what it is it's done with organizations to essentially review current policies or procedures or practices that are in place, and using this assessment in an objective manner to really explore who benefits from the practice and who might be inadvertently harmed or disadvantaged by the practice. That's like the simplest form. I'm probably not even doing that assessment justice by explaining it that way, but in simplest form, that's what it seems to be. And so there's a request to work with juvenile justice councils on implementing this REIA. The challenge becomes that the examples that they're giving us are that they've used this REIA in like singular organizations. And so what does this look like for an entity that's made up of multiple organizations that are coming together to collaborate? What is sort of the vision? So I have plans to connect with the executive director of the commission, who is kind of overseeing or kind of proposing this idea of the REIA with councils, to talk about what how our council is structured, what it is that our priorities are. I mean, she's aware of this, but really just kind of talking through it with her to see what she envisions this could look like, so I can bring back more concrete details for the board to consider. And then the last piece that kind of falls within our racial and ethnic disparities updates is our adolescent domestic battery work group. So they met in March, just continuing to plan around some of the proposed changes that came up with the statute, also gathering more information about how we can utilize the adolescent domestic battery typology tool in a productive way, or a way to help connect families with needs that may be coming up. So my next step is really checking in on the status of a meeting that we were talking about having with bringing in local legislators to talk about the proposed changes to the statute, and then also further that discussion with the typology tool. That was a lot. One item.
Any questions about any of that? Okay, so we will move on to the JJC restructure. And so some months back, we kind of floated this out of an idea to how it started was Julia has a list of members of the JJC that is very, very large. And she sends emails to all of those people. But in reality, we have a very smaller group that actually attends our quarterly meetings.
Okay.
And participates in those meetings. So we had discussions about ways to maybe give that smaller group more say in what happens. And so Julia came across an interagency agreement, which she sent out to everyone to take a look at. We had a meeting with Kathy Watson from State's Attorney Civil Department to go over it to see what she thought about the language of it. For the most part, she was good with it. She did raise the question of whether we would want to do an MOU instead of the interagency agreement. Through our discussions with Kathy, it also got Julia and I taking another look at the statute for the JJC. And we have the ability to have up to 21 voting members. So then Julia and I were just throwing around ideas of that as to whether we would want to expand our board, if we would want to potentially expand the board for term limits, for different, have a contingent of people that had term limits that were a part of our bigger group that attends the quarterly meetings. So there's lots of ideas here, and we just wanted to present it to everyone for discussion. Maybe it's something that no one else thinks is an issue, but we just kind of wanted to talk about it and see what everyone else's thoughts were. And this may be something that we need to continue to talk about next month as well, but just some initial thoughts, if anyone had initial thoughts about the interagency agreement or anything else to do with that.
Are there any agencies that are pending where we need to have an agreement like this?
So not currently. So when we, and Julia can probably explain this a little bit better, but when we originally started our JJC here in King County, it just sort of was opened to everyone, and people would send their information to Julia, and then they became a part of the email chain that she would send all information to everyone on that list. Which is fine. We can keep it like that, but it just seems that a lot of those people do not attend any of the meetings, do not take part of in any of our committees. So, the question was, do we want to offer more to the people that are a regular part of the things that we do? Questions?
And remind me, we started looking at this why? Because the members of the providers wanted more involvement, they had concerns about their lack of involvement, or we're just looking at the lack of engagement from that large group? The last one?
Yes.
So
You just noticed it, okay.
well, and part of our grant application, I have to, not this year, but years past, you have to submit who's active, a report of who's active on the council. And I had a really hard time with trying to distinguish that, because it's like, how do you define what's active? And then when we have this membership of 100 people, that's not really fair to say that they're all active, because there's so many varying levels. So we had put out that survey at the beginning of this fiscal year, and that's sort of what's informing this process. The other piece too is that we got access to a resource this fiscal year for juvenile justice councils and starting a juvenile justice council, and they reference putting together interagency agreements, as does the statute, for your relationships with partners on the council. So I think it just got us really looking into it. And I think kind of just to extend on what Rochelle had presented already, like in my mind, is our council structure as it stands right now aligned with sort of the spirit of how the statute has outlined what council should be, or have we cast almost too wide of a net and maybe we reel it back in? Like, not to influence opinions or anything, but that's just sort of where my viewpoint has been.
And so we've kind of thrown out, what we have been talking to, maybe we can give everybody a chance to consider it, take another look. Oh, Latanya, did you want to say something? Okay. Take another look at the agreement, see what you think, and we can keep it on the agenda for next month. Okay.
Can I add something, Rochelle? So I had, just for the good of the board, and as you let that all marinate over the next month, I had come across OJJDP has a coordinating council as well. So the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention It doesn't look like it's been active since 2020, which we all know what happened in 2020. But they have 21 voting members, which is sort of interesting that our statute is set up to have 21 voting members. But they have some that are specifically identified, and then they have some that are appointed by those who are identified as well. So it's a little bit different structure that might be worth, considering in this whole conversation.
Okay. So we'll continue that discussion to next month. And then, Julie, I'm going to let you talk about the grant planning that you're working on.
Yeah. So if I'm a little brain dead this week because I have been working on it. It opened up mid-April. We got basically a 4-week turnaround. Usually we get at least 6 weeks or so. Fortunately, this is a continuation grant, so it's less involved, but it is still, there's still some work to come with it. So most of it's going to be the same because it is a continuation grant. So there's a lot of updates that are being provided. But there are 3 additional priorities that I did include as part of our application. Nothing's been submitted yet. It's still under review through our state's attorney processes. So if there's changes, we can make them at this point. It's due Monday at noon though, so time is pretty limited here. But I did include that ordinance violation truancy issue as part of an RED priority. Also a mental health work group, which we have as an agenda item for later, but taking a look at the issue of mental health among youth that are involved in or coming into the system seems to be a recurring theme that we've heard. And then also the other thing that's been proposed as part of this grant application is planning for an annual conference or like a day-long conference next spring, from a whole year from now. But I was sort of, I was thinking about our training and education budget and how we continue to put money towards training opportunities, or we've talked about, sending people to national conferences or other conferences and setting aside money for that. And I don't know, I would be interested to get thoughts about doing an annual conference from the Juvenile Justice Council and having sort of a keynote speaker and then speakers on topics that would align with our current priorities. So in this case, for example, it'd be like adolescent domestic battery or adolescent brain development, mental health, racial and ethnic disparities, those sorts of topics, just as an opportunity to bring folks together, to be able to network and kind of have that intentional time set aside to learn together, and again, have conversations about some of these topics. And so I did put money in the budget for speaker fees, essentially, possibly to help with space. We can't pay for lunch out of our budget. So that would be, if we want to do lunch on our own or something like that. But that's one of the bigger proposals that's in the new grant year draft.
Is this, are you referring to the uniform budget draft document?
Yep.
I had a couple of quick questions on that, if I may. Okay. Early on, it had a salary amount of $25,000 and then an education amount of $17,000. But then later in the same document, it had a salary amount of $20,000 and a education amount of $31,000. Are those 2 different sections, or am I just confused?
Nope, I confused you, so I apologize. So that's just like a PDF that helps me organize the budget, and I was trying to go less is more explanation when I sent it out, so I apologize for if I added confusion. That first section has to be manually updated. The second section updates automatically when I start putting in the information for the line items. So it just pulls it down. So what's correct is the 20,000 and then 31 towards training and education. We take all of that and submit it into a system that we have to use for the grant itself. So none of that gets submitted. That's just a way that, like I said, I can organize it without submitting it in the system, and I can share it with all of you so you can see it in real form before we submit.
Thanks. It just didn't make sense to me.
Nope, that's fair. That's fair. Might have been more explanation you wanted, but that's the explanation behind it.
That's fine.
Anything on the grant planning? Okay, so we will move on to CPRD data presentation. And Julia has met with them to begin discussing an updated presentation. We're going to be looking at the detention decision point, but Julia is suggesting that they could also look at transfers from juvenile to adult court and the data on that. And the question to the board is if there are any other data points that we would want to be included and discussed. And then we also need to talk about dates or consider dates to do the presentation. We were considering June, but I don't, that may be a little too soon to get that completed by June. But so looking for input on that as well. So any other data points that anybody thinks should be included?
What's the time frame for the data points?
They were able, I want to say at least 2019, they might be able to do 2020 data as well. I think they can do 2020 data.
I don't think we do a lot of transfers.
Okay.
40, would you agree? I think Ms. Rochelle knows too, but we don't do a whole lot of transfers.
We do not. We probably had two or three in the last 2 years. That may change though. Yeah. I mean, we filed, but yeah.
But yeah, not even that many, I think, that get filed. And I think the state is really good about reserving those for the cases where they really think they need them. But since I've been here, and it'll be 3 years in November, I had one discretionary transfer hearing in that period of time. So I'm not sure that's the best thing to study when it's not so common.
I mean, unless you're talking about a situation where they're automatic transfers, we don't file. We file directly in, under the statute, the exclusionary jurisdiction. That would be some more, where you have ag that with a firearm or murder or sex cases. But again, they're not too many.
Even those are few.
Yeah.
Are there any, I'm sorry, Julia, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that might be something that I'll clarify on my end what they look at with the transfers, if it is the automatic ones or the discretionary ones. I don't know that they have a way of teasing that out, so it might be everything combined.
But I think even if you combine everything, you're talking about a handful of kids.
Mm-hmm.
Would you disagree?
I mean, what's maybe two handfuls. I mean, if you're talking about those that go directly to adult court and we don't do motions, there definitely are some there. Probably about 5 that are currently pending. But if you're talking about actual filing motions of discretionary transfer, I can think of 2 that we've actually done and transferred. And then we have 1 pending now. So there's really not a lot. I agree.
If there are any other data areas that you think should be included, maybe reach out to Julia and so that we can consider, or she can consider making that a part of it as well.
Sure.
Is that an area where you can consider studying the number of kids, and I hate to be the broken record, but with mental health issues or because that's what's running rampant.
These are correct me if I'm wrong, Julie, these are the data points as to how many petitions were filed, the breakdown of that, whether or not they were sentenced to probation or supervision, whether or not they were detained into DJJ or sentenced or committed to DJJ, whether or not you had transfers. This is the commission data points that she's referencing, and those are the intersections that they look at. And again, the arrest that we've never really been able to give them data on. Correct, Julie?
Yes, correct.
I think it's kind of a shame though to look at it in isolation because it really doesn't tell the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
When you just extract that in that manner.
I think that's where they encourage, like, you look at the data as what the decision points show, and then that's for our jurisdiction. Then, we know that mental health is a concern, and so how is it affecting now the decisions or what we're seeing at those decision point data? It's just sort of a starting point, acknowledging that there is a lot more to that story and that we need to dig into deeper.
And what about date? Do we think June is too soon to do it?
Latanya's saying yes.
The time, yeah.
Latanya's saying like 2023.
I think you need to clarify as to what our role in this is. Is the commission coming to us doing a presentation? Are we doing can you kind of clarify that?
Yeah, it's the CPRD, the Center for Prevention, Research and Development, which is they're contracted with the commission to look at the specifically more so the detention data, but they would be doing the presentation just like we did last year. So it's just where we come, it's probably be like an hour and a half presentation for stakeholders to come and view the presentation, take in the data, and then continue to ponder it and think about what do we need to dig into deeper? What, how could mental health be affecting this or other factors be affecting this?
Because it could, and will they give us insight as to maybe how other jurisdictions have tackled it? So let's say we say it's mental health. What is it, how we are viewing it, how we're responding to it? Will they give, as a part of that presentation, is it that they give tips as to how we can tease out how we're responding potentially at those decision points that could be inadvertently affecting the disparities?
I think yes and no. I think that it's an interpretation of what the data is saying and maybe additional considerations. So if you think back to last year, it was Doug Smith who did it. He gave us that graph of the warrants and how the trajectory of warrants over time. And we know that like at court services, you all started making those reminder calls. And so did we see an impact on that, or do we need to dig into it further because we don't know where those warrants are originating, whether it's because of FTAs or it's some other reason. So it's not necessarily giving recommendations. It's more so just kind of giving the information about what it is and putting out food for thought. What are some areas we need to consider based on what the data shows?
I mean, and I'm just thinking also when we were just talking about the transfers, you also, you can have like a broad category, but then you have subcategories like anything else. And when I think about transfers, are you talking about where we've lifted EJJP stays and sent them to adult prison? Because I've got those too. So like, is that considered a transfer? Yes, they now have an adult sentence because they violated their juvenile sentence. So I don't know if that is or not. Like transfer in the real sense, I'm thinking of when we file a motion and it gets transferred. So those are things, Julia, we can talk about. If you want those stats, I can get them pretty easily. I don't know.
And so maybe we need some clarification from them on what that is.
And they would define those decision points, how they collect them, what's encompassed in that. And so then to your point, Debbie, knowing what's encompassed in, if it is every adult transfer and it could account for all that, then that's where we could dig in deeper and say, okay, which goes in which category here, and then really find where the issue is. I think that's just another example of how you start to pinpoint if that's the priority that the board wants to proceed with.
Okay.
So I think either way, we're thinking June is too soon.
All right. Is there a better time, like after the summer? Is it better if we shoot for fall or?
Football season. No, I'm kidding. That's fine.
Well, it won't be no Friday night lights or Sunday night football. Monday night football is off the table too. So
we could maybe do it the end of the summer.
Okay. Either give us time to kind of figure out what data points or like we want to examine.
Right.
To go back to the judge's point, do we look at maybe probation versus supervision? Because a good majority is probation versus supervision. Is that a decision point we can dig into a little deeper to, as to why, or is that something else that we can consider? Maybe we just need to kind of take a step back and maybe give the data again, Julia, and have people consider if we think the transfers might not be valuable, I think we should go into the presentation already kind of understanding what we want to look at more closely, if that makes sense.
And I will have to ask them what they have access to be able to provide us with, because I don't know that they'd be able to tell us probation versus supervision based on their systems. that they're looking at.
Julia, can you explain, so the data that you want to look at and the decision points at the various places in whatever subject or area they're looking at, is that tied into the racial inequity diversion issue? What is it, what is it tied into? What is the purpose or the end goal of it?
So for our racial and ethnic disparities, the way that we look at the data is across 5 decision points, and those decision points are determined by OJJDP, the Federal Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention. And the decision points are arrest, diversion, transfers to adult, I'm not saying these in order, transfers to adult, IDJJ commitments, and detention. So that's what sort of informs what data we look at, and then where we see those disparities, that's when we can dig in deeper to see what are some of the other factors that are happening with those individuals.
Okay. All right, any other on that? All right, and then the last thing of old business is Julia distributed the proposal for a sort of a training on cultural competency. It would be done by a local person, Tracy Ellis, and Julia has indicated that we could look into continuing continuing education hours as well as doing it virtually. We can talk about a timeline for it if people think it's a good idea. The audience for this would be anyone working with youth and families in the community, especially those who are at risk of involvement in the juvenile justice system or who are currently in the juvenile justice system. So were there any questions or comments on the proposal that Julia sent out? Are people in favor of us going forward to try to see if we can accommodate it? So I've seen some heads.
Is this the iCart Media LLC?
Yeah.
What is this organization?
I don't know what iCart Media is. That might be her own just LLC she is that she uses for her speaking engagements. That I don't know. I can certainly ask.
I mean, is this somebody you know and somebody that's?
I know Tracy Ellis. She's an attorney here in the Elgin area. She's been around a long time. Does a lot of community service type stuff. I didn't know she did this, but
I've heard other partners have used her for speaking engagements that are on this topic. I can get maybe a bio. Would that be helpful for folks if they would want to see her credentials and credibility?
Why don't we do that, Julia, and then we can rediscuss next month?
Okay.
if it could qualify for CLE, it could probably be partnered with KCBA.
Great idea.
So that might be something to ask Tracy if it would qualify for CLE.
You'll get a lot of involvement.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to try to be cognizant of our time. We still have 2 voting things to get to, so we're going to move on to new business. Part of this, Julie, I'm going to save for next month.
Okay.
So the email vote, just to let everyone know for CCBYS, the letter of support for them for Aunt Martha's, that did pass. So just so everyone knows that. And then we have 2 voting matters. The first is, does the Board of Directors approve partnering with West Aurora to host a 2-part parent equity workshop in fiscal year 2023? If I could have a motion to open that for discussion.
I'll make a motion.
And a second. Okay, great. So this is just a little background. There was an email vote sent out on this, but the email vote did not pass because there were questions as to needing additional information. So Julia did send out some additional information. So we wanted to put it back on the agenda to make sure that if there was more discussion that needed to be had about it, and where everyone stood on it. So are there any questions in regards to what was sent out, the additional information sent out? Okay. Then,
Well, I think I had made the comment, I had voted to approve, but I was misunderstanding how proportionately it would be shared between us and West Aurora. In other words, are they going to get a commitment from us and then not try and get anyone else to participate? So I was thinking maybe if we did it on a percentage rather than a set dollar amount. But I mean, I want to support it, but I guess we don't know who else they're going to reach out to partner, right?
I do know that she wanted to connect with, she was connecting with State's Attorney Mosser, and I believe I connected her with the parent councils in the community. So whether or not she'll try and get funding from those, I don't know. But she is looking to extend opportunities to partner with other organizations or entities.
And this is a workshop for parents to go to, is that correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Just the amount is, I feel, very high. And I don't know what the going rate for this type of speaker is. To me, it's astronomical for 3 hours. And I would be worried about parents not showing up. Sometimes parents don't show up for stuff and you're spending an enormous amount of money. I mean, is this going to be in a giant auditorium? Is this you know what I mean? I think some issues, what parents show up to and what they don't show up to, to me, just in my experience of school and just parenting, I would be worried that we make this investment and not a lot of people would show up. That would be my worry.
I completely agree with that. When I saw those numbers for 3 hours total and this person getting paid $20,000, I think I don't support that, but I was willing to listen to additional information. And I don't think I saw that. I saw that you were getting more information, but I agree. And even the thing we did with the students, we had 4 students show up when all of us put our time in there. And that was surprising. I mean, I don't think any of us expected that. So I think we would like information on why is it so much money for a total of this person's 3 hours of time?
I believe some of that does include travel, if that's worth anything to anyone. I believe this person is out of California. So that may be part of it. I don't know that it's all speaking fees, but I could certainly get a breakdown of what that number goes to if that's helpful. Or if we want to not support it. Sorry, Judge.
I was just going to ask, so this would be at West Aurora High School?
Yes.
I guess I agree with my concern, and I know this is a really timely topic and it's all over. Honestly, I guess I just wish people could come and see what we hear and what we're dealing with in court, because to me, this isn't where the money should go. You know, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I also agree that I think it's a lot of money, and I think if we had that much money, there are a lot of other places I would love to see the money, even just for West Aurora and the kids who are coming in, who are having all sorts of issues. And it isn't just mental health issues. You know, it's a lot of different things that they're struggling with. And most of the kids, not all of them in that school district, but most of the kids that we see in court are either Black or brown. And so a lot of this is stuff that they live, I mean, and they know. I don't know that that's even the right target audience. I don't know.
All right, we can go ahead and we can take a vote, or we can table it for more information. Should we take a vote? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
As to whether we're going to take a vote or we're going to table it.
I guess we're going to take a vote. Nobody said. We're going to take a vote. We're going to take a vote as to whether we want to approve partnering with them. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Okay.
So it did not pass. Okay, so then we are moving on to our next vote. If I could have a motion to discuss approving the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget.
I'll make the motion.
And a second.
I'll second.
I know that Julia sent out information on this. Does anybody have any questions or things that they want to discuss in relation to the budget? Okay.
Rochelle, sorry, before we vote on the budget, there is a line item for that anticipating that, oh, you were getting to that, sorry. Gonna shut my mouth.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Maybe we were talking about two different things. Go ahead.
No, there was funding that was allotted to be able to support that training just in anticipation of that vote. So that would have to be removed. So I don't know if we need to resubmit a vote or if we can.
So I'm probably going to need some guidance with Robert's rules as to whether we need to take that. Do we need to officially take that out? And
Is it just where it is? I didn't see it. It's not listed as that program. It's just included in the gross amount for training or education.
Yeah, it's a line item on the training and education section that is for parent equity workshop.
so I would assume if we could say that we are taking that portion out and voting on the budget minus that portion, we could go forward with the vote.
Although I imagine Julia wants to add that amount back in somewhere else, right? I mean, because we don't want to reduce the total, do we? Or
we just wouldn't have, I mean, if there's something that we can allot it towards, that would be great, but I don't want to allot more funding towards something that we're not going to spend it on. We've historically given money back. So I was trying to be really responsible with it this time. So if we don't want to move forward with that, we can just take it out.
Well, I'd make a motion to approve the budget as presented with that line item deleted.
Do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay. All right, then we will take a vote then. Does the Board of Directors approve the proposed budget minus the line item for the funding for the parent equity workshop? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, please say nay. Okay, so that one did pass. Just real quick, one more, because I know our time is come to pass. Judge Parga sent out information on a task force for mental health. We would like to begin a mental health work group within our Juvenile Justice Council, and to really spell out the issues and dig into it further. Just looking to see if the board would be supportive of that. Anybody opposed to doing that? Okay. So then Julia will send out an email to see who would be interested to serve on that committee, and we'll go forward with from that then.
Why would we be doing something like that totally separate as opposed to working with one of the existing 501c3s in the county?
And it's so certain, absolutely, that so I don't know if you got the email. Was everybody on the email, Julia?
No.
Okay. So maybe we can start by sending out at least the task force information to everyone so that you can, I apologize, I thought everybody was on it, so that you can see what the task force is. And certainly we could talk about opening that committee up to people outside of just the board to have input.
What we also do, just to kind of, I think kind of to follow up what Mr. Tempe is saying, is maybe as we're considering it, see what's going on with the health department as well, because I think sometimes we start to silo, and the health department is working on this and they've got, you know, a grant for this, and, you know, they got their system of care and all of that. I don't know if maybe have them come do a presentation on what they found as it relates to mental health and what's out, you know, maybe to help inform that decision.
So what it was the National Center for State Courts released guidelines for principals on juvenile court for mental health diversion. That's what it was. So I'm happy to send it to everybody, but it just talked about different guidelines that they felt should be included in juvenile court for to address the kids with mental health. And we don't really have anything like that here for us. So that was really more the purpose of it, and why it wasn't immediately linked to one of the agencies in the communities providing services. We do work with a lot of agencies in the community. A lot of them are really short-staffed. A lot of them are more geared specifically towards adults, not children. I mean, it's everything I'm sure everyone's read in all the, you know, Tribune articles. It was on 60 Minutes. It's been everywhere because it is an epidemic. But this is just encouraging juvenile courts to establish guidelines and principles for that and how we address kids who come before us with those needs.
Is everybody aware of the work that Martha Paschke is doing in the county in regard to diversion and that particular group that she has?
I believe that's for adults.
It is.
That's all adults. Juvenile diversion, and we do a lot with the diversion. I'm talking about court services. Year to year, we divert from the court system anywhere between 45 and 60% of the referrals that we receive. So that would almost be what we already do as part of kind of what that Martha Paschke program is on the adult side. So when Judge Parker said that, I think it was something that we could maybe look at how we deal with when they do get to court and some things like that. But it's, to answer your question, that's only on the adult side.
Well, she's obtained funding for, you know, for her particular effort, which is being done under the state's attorney's office. But, you know, when you start talking about mental health, the big challenge, and it was mentioned earlier, is that the need far exceeds the ability for any of these agencies to deliver. And, you know, for us to put an additional need without having the right resources is, you know, let's make sure we've got the resources and really make this happen, or partner with somebody. Or we can talk to Michael at the health department. I know he's been working on it from a different perspective.
So I was actually on a meeting last night with Michael for the Kane County System of Care, which I think is part of what Tanya's referencing with what the health department's heading. They definitely gave a status update on where our agencies are in the community with regards to their wait list, how long it's taking families to be able to get into services. But I think that sitting as part of I'm grateful to be a part of those conversations, but I think sitting as part of those conversations, it doesn't specifically target youth that are involved in the juvenile justice system and their mental health needs, which whether or not they're different, I don't know. But I think that's sort of like Judge Parker was saying, that's sort of the angle that we want to take a look at, is what can we be doing to help support this and be aligned with what's happening in the community, knowing that there are other initiatives out there. We certainly don't want to duplicate. And I think that's historically why we've kind of stayed away from mental health. But because it's become so prevalent in the court system, it seems like it's worthwhile to look into.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Julie. So Julia can send out an email on that and we can go from there. Very last thing, just to get everybody thinking about it, and we can talk about it more next month, is we have to start getting our meeting dates for our fiscal year 2023. So just be thinking about to talk about next month. Do we like the format that we're doing? Do we want to change the format? How we want to have our meetings going into 2023. So just start thinking about that for next month. And anything that anybody else had. Okay. Sorry, I've kept you later. Can I have a motion to adjourn then?
Motion made.
And a second.
Second.
Okay, thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.